The cold has left the majority of the world, but it's just begun over here in the southern hemisphere, which can only mean one thing. Spring has sprung and the anime season for it has just wrapped up for the year. With a lot of anime to talk through and a lot of good ones and a couple that just missed the mark of quality, let's get to rounding them up with this quarter's seasonal anime roundup.
Hey there everyone, it's Chloe here. So, it's been a hot minute since you see me in person, so I figured I'd make the actual effort of doing this one in person, and also because the last time I did one of these, I was trying to do it in person and in front of the camera, but I was sick during that period of time, so it was a little bit interesting. Also, I was on a little bit of a crunch during that period of time, so, trying to make it a little bit easier to work with this. But, welcome to the seasonal anime roundup for spring. And if this is your first time watching one of my seasonal roundup videos, here's the basic outline. Here are all of the anime that I watched this past season to completion, or if they were only one core animes that have been continued on, here are the ones that were only continued on for this season from a previous one. And I'll be covering them all one by one in order to see which one I enjoyed from the least to the one that I'll be enjoying the most from this past anime season. Last time I made a comment on ranking ongoing anime separately, but I didn't end up doing it, and I feel I'm going to just abolish that rule entirely and rank each core as it is, as its own separate entity, and if it's a continuing season, I'll just rank it alongside everything else. But alongside that, you'll also notice on the list this time around, there's one I didn't cover last time, but this is due to the fact that I've recently caught up on this, and I will be retroactively discussing the previous core thoughts alongside this core for posterity. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get to the list proper with the one I felt was the weakest out of the ones I watched.
So last we spoke about Scum and the Brave, I said that the first core was hopefully going to do a lot of the heavy lifting on the setup for the second half, and as a result would mean that the second half wouldn't be able to focus on everything it had set up, and that if it didn't, it would end up being a bit of a dud. And while it didn't absolutely become a dud, don't get me wrong, I found myself having similar issues regarding this second half of the series. A lot of pacing problems, a lot of questions not being properly addressed, and the ones that do get addressed are only really brought up in the last 6 episodes of the show.
To that end, I want to make it clear right now, Scum and the Brave as a completed work, it's fine. It's not exactly something I'm gonna go back and watch anytime soon, however, although I feel with its character dynamics and goofy as hell art style at times, it could be ripe for making an abridged series out of this. But a lot of what was being set up in part 1, it really did not pay off by the end of it, which is honestly a massive shame because this series did have some interesting concepts, some really nicely done fight scenes when it reminded the viewers that it could have something decent going on. Unfortunately, the same damn issues from Core 1 rear their ugly head almost immediately. The first 4 episodes of this core specifically have some really bad pacing issues, as the Hokkaido trip starts off on a weird note, and while it did have some moments, the last 2 episodes of that part could have easily been condensed into 1. Hell, the entire return to Tokyo, and eventually facing off against the big bad of the series in Count Coffin of Storms. God, what a weird naming convention. A lot of the setup leading to that battle, which is just them chasing or being chased by the organization, could have just been smushed together into a few episodes. There is no reason why we had to spend a majority of the middle portion of this course specifically on big-ass chase sequences for one entire episode. You could have easily condensed that down into like half of one episode. That's how slow it felt at points. Point I am trying to make here is that Scum and the Brave's biggest issue was the pacing remained at a snail's pace the entire time, and by the time things really kicked into high gear properly, I was already 2 weeks behind and ready to cement it at this spot. So of course, those last 2 episodes were where I really actually began to give a shit about this again, huh?
Yeah, Scum and the Brave's ending act was a fun one. The last 4 episodes were a good note to end on. However, I won't be sad if we never get a continuation of this. But for what we got, it's a good series if you need some dumb fun. Just don't go expecting much more than that. It's a 3 out of 5 stars. Nothing too offensive, but nothing too engaging either. So, this year's theme for the channel trajectory, much like how last year was the year I got into Uma Musume and that became my big hyperfixation of a franchise, the majority of it, is me finally going deep down into the rabbit hole that is the Precure franchise. While I have watched some seasons of Precure solo, mainly the first 3 seasons from Futariwa to Splash Star, and being shown a couple seasons thanks to my wife and a best friend of a decade collaborate show me more in Alamode, Mahou Sakai, and Heartcatch back to back. This, however, is the first season I am actively watching week to week. And boy howdy do I have some opinions on where this has gone as so far as we reach the halfway mark of Star Detective Precure. Okay, so basic premise. Ana Akechi on her 14th birthday has traveled back in time from 2027 to 1999, meeting up with a wannabe detective in Mikuru Kobayashi after an incident leads them to both solving a case together and becoming this season's Precures, Cure Answer and Cure Mystique respectively. They take up jobs at Mikuru's Kyoto agency to help find out and find a way to get Ana back to her own time. In their way is a league of phantom thieves and the mooks for this season, the Haninda, alongside a mysterious girl who was once a Precure on the side of light but is turned to evil, Cure Arcana Shadow, with a mystery regarding her turn to the dark side which the duo of girls are trying to uncover as well.
I didn't cover this one in the first quarterly anime roundup of the year because I was a bit behind on it when I was first watching it initially earlier this year, and therefore couldn't really give an exact full opinion on it back then. But now that I have properly caught myself up on Meitante and its first core and watched Core 2 as it came out week to week, here's my thoughts. Core 1 is a very good setup 12 episodes, establishing a main basis of the series, the dynamic between Ana and Mikuru, alongside other members of the detective agency and Jet, a fairy disguised as a human who runs the admin at the agency as well as create the Cure's kit of tools throughout the series, as well as marketable plush Pochitan, who is used to store the MacGuffins of the series that they are collecting, the Makoto jewels, who goes off the likes of previous fairies of its nature and basically speaks his own name like a Pokemon, and is treated like a child that they care over when not in battle. Also alongside that, it also gives us some proper time to establish Arcana Shadow before her reveal at the end of the 13 episode mark, leading us in with a slow burn before eventually giving us the reveal of her as this season's Dark Cure, while not explicitly having her fight alongside the thieves, more just doing her own thing. Core 2, on the other hand, is where I feel like mostly the rails have begun to fall off a bit. As unfortunately I feel like this is where part of every modern Precure's issues begin to rear its ugly head, as aside from the continued mystery regarding Arcana Shadow's backstory and the mysterious fourth Cure and Cure Eclair being mentioned, and this recent core ending in the middle of her reveal arc, which by the way, has this weird tie-in marketing campaign as the public is made to guess who she'll be in 4 different candidates. It's an odd move for something that was kept as a surprise in seasons up until this point. I don't really get why Toei feels a need to suddenly have it be a marketing thing, but anyway. These past 12 or 13 episodes in the core have very felt like barely any plot has moved along, instead focusing on some smaller episodic early stories to tie into the potential Cure Claire storyline, as well as a Detective Conan crossover which, while memorable, felt like another marketing gimmick to garner interest between the two shows' fandoms, rather than being an actual potential highlight of the season. This isn't to say I'm not enjoying Star Detective Precure, but more that I feel worried that I am about to have a repeat of Scum of the Brave on my hands here, when I say that I am hoping for the back half maybe makes up for the first half being a bit hit or miss.
Only time will tell if I am wrong or right, or if this is going to be, apparently, the second Precure season in 2 years to be a bit less than memorable. which, given I have yet to watch You and Idol Precure myself, gives me some worries, but regardless. For what we have seen so far, Core 1 and 2 of Meitante Precure gets a 3.25 out of 5. It's a good start in the first core and a middling second core for sure, but I am hoping the next two cores give me something to sing its praises for by the end, and hoping I don't have to do a repeat of Scum of the Brave with it later in the year. Because gay shit cannot just be contained to the lesbians, this season we finally got the long-awaited anime adaptation of Boys Love slice of life manga Go For It Nakamura-kun. Following the daily life of Okuto Nakamura, a boy who's come to realize in his daily high school life that he's a Sorry, I realize by the time this video comes out it's no longer Pride Month, so I'm no longer allowed to say slurs on Maine in an affirming manner. He's come to the realization that not only is he gay, but he's got it down bad for a classmate of his in Aiki Hirose, to the point where he's having manic breakdowns in his everyday life whenever he's around the lad. Combine that with Nakamura's social ineptitude, as well as the general anxieties of being a queer high school student in a mostly cishet environment, and shenanigans are bound to occur. And for 13 episodes in length, it does the job of telling the story of the 2-volume manga series off pretty well.
Anime by Studio Drive, whose sporadic work includes the third season of Konosuba and tying the knot with an Amagami sister, Ganbare's art style matches closely to the aesthetic style of the manga originally made in 2017 and its sequel series in 2021. Alongside that, with the vibes and the endings using a unique city pop song in each of the endings alongside a unique visual matching up with the vibe of the episode's antics before it, makes for this series being aesthetically pleasing from front to back. Content-wise, for the story, however, it's good when it's good and wholesome, but when it begins to remind you of how high school was, if you know exactly how Nakamura felt in his predicament, gay or any spectrum of queerness, take your pick, or hell, even overthinking in regards to social awkwardness, Jesus Christ, it can really make you cringe if you're not careful. Especially down to openly reading a boys love manga out in public and trying not to let other people at school find out. Dear Lord, Nakamura can be a bit too real at times. But that, I feel, is part of the double-edged sword that this show's charm. It's lovely and really amazingly funny while having some moments that will make you cry out in joy, while also having some moments that will destroy you if you're not ready on either spectrum of its secondhand embarrassment, or feeling like you see yourself too much within poor Nakamura at times. There are a few moments in the series' early goings that do in fact make me cringe out of no sense of joy, and there's one dynamic with a rival character from Hirose's childhood that feels a bit one-note at times. But otherwise, I do feel I genuinely love a lot of what Ganbare has to offer, and feel I'd recommend it to those who enjoy a good slice of life comedy for the gays, but with men this time around. It does have some issues in the first few episodes that make it a bit of a hard sell for those who live and die by the 3-episode rule for sure. But if you pass that test, you'll be rewarded with something truly amazing and a story that I would be pleased to recommend to any Boys Love fans out there. Also, if you enjoy your dubs, this one is definitely one of the two that I can recommend for this lot of anime. The casting choices are beyond on point, the delivery is amazing, and honestly the voice actors for Nakamura and Hirose, Nassim Pedokor and Patrick Pedraza, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your surnames on this one, but they were killing it episode by episode. Shoutouts go to episodes 6 and 12 respectively for some amazing performances from them and the extended cast. A really big W from front to back in terms of the performances.
It gets a 3.75 out of 5 here. Not a bad margin, mind you, but definitely worth asking yourself if it's your kind of thing, and if you can survive its grueling opening act before committing. I do think it's worth it, however.
Yeah, it was nice to meet you and everything. But there are some things you should know.
Now, if you want some slice of life involving awkward boys in high school before the cishets, OtaGal, or Gals Can't Be Kind to Otaku, has you covered. Animated by TMS Entertainment and based off the currently ongoing manga series of the same name. OtaGal focuses on the titular otaku Takuya Seo, affectionately nicknamed Takun by the others in the main cast, is befriended by his seatmates who have been seemingly newfound besties in Kei Amane and Kotoko Ichiji. playing up two separate ends of the Gyaru stereotype compared to the rest of their class. Takun ends up being befriended by the two of them due to a chance encounter in class one day involving Takun being essentially outed as a fan of children's anime Glittermon, thanks to his eraser being taken by Ichiji. Amane ends up noticing it and tries her best to not let it show. Shenanigans obviously occur. After that, and following exchange, which eventually leads to Takun and Amane ending up sharing similar interests together, despite Amane's more tsundere-ish nature, the three quickly become mutual friends and, over the course of the next 12 episodes to follow, learn more about their personal lives, interests, and, eventually, how they all feel about each other.
In comparison to Gambare's take on social ineptitude and suddenly being frustrated to social situations, OtaGal shows a less exaggerated look on the cishet scale of it, while also giving some grounded approaches to it which can leave some viewers that went through similar experiences in that period of life with a little bit of discomfort in a way. Hell, I found myself relating more to Ichiji and Amane than I did to Takun in this series, but I still could see some semblance of myself in each of them as the series pressed on. Especially in Ichiji's anxieties despite the cheerful demeanor she puts on as a front in her social circles. God, I relate to that Gyaru too much, honestly. But in that same vein though, I did know or was like Amane at certain points in time in high school, being too afraid to let my love of anime out into the public and putting on a slightly stoic exterior to hide my excitement whenever others brought it up. That quickly went away thanks to people around me, however, also being into it, but I can heavily relate to her regardless. And Takun. God, poor Takun. He's basically how I was before the estrogen, and on the fun, I can look back fondly on this time kind of way. And more in the, I feel like I am being seen too hard, and I do not enjoy this kind of way. All considered, however, their dynamic makes for a very lovely show to follow along as it was week to week, and I found myself really invested between the story as these three found friends so much, I was seriously thinking they might pull a Watanare before the end and have it go down a Fropple route. The ending they do end up going for by the end is just as wholesome, however, but honestly, for some episodes in the middle part, it did come across as very one-note at times, with some characters and jokes not really landing as well as I'd like, Ichiji and Amane's kid siblings being two different kinds of the annoying smug kid coin all considered that I don't really like all that much. But it's not nearly enough for me to dissuade anyone from watching this series. Just keep in mind that it can be a bit whatever at times, despite the premise reeling you in with the promise of shenanigans. And also on top of that, if you don't like the constant flip-flopping of a tsundere type, Amane may tire you after a while.
Negatives aside, however, it's a clear 4 out of 5 here, and one I'd easily recommend to anyone who is wanting to have some fun, while also feel some nice wholesome moments in the middle as well. It's a good time all throughout. This pick, however, is one I feel may have everyone up in arms about, but I promise you, I have very good reasons for putting Hat Atelier on at my third best of the season, despite it arguably being one of the most anticipated efforts of the year by a lot. Adapting the currently ongoing manga series is Bug Films, who's made this their second effort after doing the Zom 100 adaptation back 3 years ago. And with this as their next big work, all eyes are on them to not fuck it up, given how much Hat Atelier is loved by among the current base. And by God did they not fuck it up. Following the story of dressmaker Coco, whose obsession with magic since a child leads her to an encounter with a witch named Kifri. Upon learning the secrets of how magic works in their world by writing runes onto a piece of paper, she begins to try and learn it herself off a book she was given as a child. This then leads to her going too hard too fast, leading to her mother and their house being crystallized, Kifri taking her under his wing due to the circumstances alongside his other apprentices in Agot, Tetia, and Riche, in order to learn more and try to uncover how to undo the spell that she cast and save her mother. However, the apprentices she shares her new life as a witch with aren't all that friendly. Mainly Agot will touch on her in a bit, and it does seem as though there is a conspiracy that Kifri is wanting to uncover regarding a sect known as the Brimhat. thoughts, who he thinks might be behind the inciting incident with Coco.
All of this leads to a lot of tension, both personally or otherwise, as Kiefer and the rest of his atelier end up being swept up in the middle of this and need to learn how to work as one, as well as their own separate journeys, but to be able to overcome the Brim Hats as well as each other overcome their own separate issues. Some of them are pretty easy to handle, such as Tetia and Riche's brands of ADHD and autism respectively being barriers of development. Others are a gut, which leads me down a very controversial talking point I'm going to try and mitigate. See, I enjoyed watching Witch Hat Atelier throughout the last seasonal period, but my God, I did not enjoy any level of discussion being read online about it, wherein it was devolving into a lot of mudslinging over fictional children who are each going through it in their own different ways. It was ugly to read, disgusting to have to see it be labeled as discourse, and actively made me disengage with the Witch Hat Atelier fan base as a whole this season, as to not feel like I was losing my mind. Seriously, what the fuck is this fandom? But getting back to the point of the show itself, Agathe and Coco are both divisive characters in their own right, but I love them both for what they each bring to the overall dynamic as well as on their own. Because I love Coco's Pollyanna approach to magic and how wonderful it is, but I can also admit she's kind of in over her head despite her wins. Meanwhile, Agathe is truly insufferable before the first act is over, and I actively wish for her to be thrown to the pits of hell because her attitude to everyone allowed her being, "I hate you, I'm better than all of you, fuck off," gave her X-Pac level heat with me. And then episode 5 happens, and I kinda turn around a bit and I find myself rooting for them both to get what they want out of being a witch. Tetia is also a personal favourite of mine. We stan Welsh girlies. On that note as well, this is the second show this season that I watched dubbed, and everyone is on point front to back. The accents of the world they chose for each character, fucking amazing. The acting itself was like if the rent was overdue in every goddamn episode, and I mean that in a positive manner. And the voice casting choices, every single one of them, it was peak all the way through. This is one I would actually recommend that you watch it dubbed over subbed for that alone. I will bet you money that you would enjoy it more in that experience alone.
Only real thing dragging it down, the ending. It's another one like Hanakimi, which ends on a very sudden note, and then we get confirmation there's a second season currently in the works. So maybe we'll get a second core of it this year at some point, like Fate Strange Fake. If so, it might be another Anime of the Year contender as a total package. But for now, despite its gorgeous imagery, amazing peaks, and crushing valleys in its first core, Witch Hat Atelier is only going to get a 4.25 out of 5 for the moment. I hope to maybe see it improve with a second season later this year, but time will only tell on that front if we do get it, or if it's going to be a nebulous to be continued like Strange Fake.
Listen, if you haven't been sold on Digimon Beatbreak by now, I do not know what to tell you. This past arc has only improved greatly upon what I said in the previous seasonal roundups on how amazing it has been front to back, and it hasn't slowed down yet. This recent core has continued the trend of managing to keep upping the ante every single goddamn week. The themes keep getting darker, if not in the grimdark kind of way, which is the best kind of way, honestly. And the arcs involving Reina's inadequacy in the middle of the gift arc, which, while it has felt a little bit slow at points until the reveal at the tail end, it makes up for greatly with showing us the after effects from the Tactics saga and the main players of it and where they are at now, while also making it clear that something in the endgame awaits for all of them beneath the surface. Not really much else I can say that isn't repeating points from the last 6 months. Go watch this series, it gets a 4.5 out of 5 here, and it is still on track for being one of the best Digimon seasons of all time, unless something happens to make it trip at the finish line. And I hope I haven't jinxed myself by saying that.
Look, when gay shit comes around, there is a very good chance that it will most likely end up in the top half of my list each quarter. But when an anime that is gay shit, but is also a beautiful piece of art visually and through its storytelling week to week, yeah, Botan Kamiina Fully Blossoms When Drunk is something special. Following the everyday life of the titular Botan Kamiina alongside the rest of her university dorm mates as they navigate everyday life, and the smaller interconnected relationships that they have with each other in their boarding, but in particular the slowly budding relationship between Botan and their dorm's RA, Ibuki Tonami. The two initially bond over drinks after the two sneak away from the group, Ibuki drinking in private to hide her hiccups, which Botan finds endearing. This being the thing that gets the two to bond more over the course of the following 12 episodes. Through many drinks and more experiences together, the two slowly grow together despite some issues from ghosts from each other's pasts coming to maybe cause issues.
You may notice I use the term slowly a lot in that rundown. That's because this is me essentially flagging it early on that this show is in every sense of the word a slow burn romance anime. From the moment we meet Ibuki and Botan, the two share a drink together, it takes almost the entire show's length for us to properly know for certain that these two are in fact more than just drinking buddies. And that is down to the fact that while I have mentioned pacing issues and shows feeling like a slog at times, Botan does not feel at all like that, despite barely feeling like anything at all has happened episode to episode. I feel like that is the highest mark of quality of honor that I could give to this because it made 24 minutes fly by like nothing else week to week. Truly, it's a masterclass in not just how to create a more down-to-earth Yuri series, but arguably how to create an anime that knows how to respect the time you give it each week and reward you with some of the best character interactions and well-animated moments episode to episode.
Hence, speaking of the animation, it's arguably one of the most uniquely animated works I have seen in quite some time, as each episode had a completely new animation director at the helm, which allows for each episode to have its own separate identity and be more memorable as a result. In fact, it's due to this that it arguably can set the tone instantly for the kind of episode you're getting into with this show. If the animation style is more loose and goofy, you're probably going to get a less intense episode. Or if you're getting some beautifully animated scenes or more darker tones, you're probably going to get an episode with some harder hitting or intense moments, for good or bad.
It's part of what made Botan Kamiina such an absolute joy to watch week to week. Also helped by the fact that the cast of characters are some of the messiest, but arguably well-rounded casts I have seen in quite a while. You get the sense that every character goes through a respective arc in the show's 12-episode run. Which is wild, given the fact that this is based off a still ongoing manga, and there's so much more that happens past the point that this series ends off for the moment, and yet I would be absolutely satisfied if this remained a one-season wonder. Which is such a rarity, given the fact that I really do want more of these characters and their messy lives. The only true downside I could really find is that some episodes do kind of feel a bit too artsy to the point where I feel like I could potentially alienate certain viewers. But even then, that is me being so nitpicky, I almost wanted to not even mention it so as I don't sound too pretentious here. It is that good of a show.
For all of that and more, I hope you understand why I am putting Botan Kamiina Fully Blossoms When Drunk not just at the top of my list for this season's rankings, but at the current top of my year-to-date list with my first 5 out of 5 ranking for the year. It's a damn perfect series with an amazing identity front to back that I feel would be a shame if it got ignored. If you didn't watch it this season, I implore you to take some time in an afternoon or two, crack open your favorite alcoholic beverage and watch this while you slowly sip it. And as for the next quarter, check back with me at the end of October as I discuss my thoughts on Hanakimi Core 2, Beatbreak Core 4, Meitante Core 3, Bang Dream Yume Mita, grow-up show, The Ghost in the Shell, young ladies don't play fighting games, and I want to love you till your dying day. Until then, thank you all again to hearing me ramble on about my thoughts for this season of anime. I've been Chloe the Reviewer, and I'll catch you next time. Jamata.